we're going to train common TOEFL topics on the TOEFL, specifically the social sciences. So this is going to introduce you to some vocab words and ideas that are going to prepare you for what you can expect on 25% of your TOEFL reading, listening, speaking, and writing tests, right? So you're going to get information, and 25% of that is going to be related to the social sciences. So this next part of the video comes from an edited version of our Instagram Live. So hope it helps. Wanted to put it on YouTube here as well for you. So welcome everybody. Good morning. Happy you're here. Today we're going to cover common TOEFL topics. This will be our third class in the series. And today we're going to cover the social sciences. So before we covered physical sciences, then life sciences, now social sciences, and then in our next live, number 4, we'll do art. So this way you're really prepared. So let's begin with our first sentence. TOEFL topics focus on the physical sciences, life sciences, social sciences, and art. That's fundamentally all of the topics that you'll get. And of course, these are huge topics. So today we're going to focus on the social sciences. These tend to be a little bit more comfortable for students. The social sciences examine human behavior, relationships, and societal structures. So let's explore that. Human behavior, that's a big one with psychology. So whenever we talk about behavior, it's why do you do what you do? Procrastination, working hard. Why do you work late? Why do you finish early? Why do you delay things? Why do you want to work? Why do people take breaks at certain times? So human behavior is like the activities that we do and why we do them. And when I talk about this, in general, to help you succeed on the TOEFL, make sure that every time you're reading something, you're letting something be curious and you're visualizing. Because any of these topics come from real life. So whenever you take what you are learning and you imagine it and visualize it, you're going to do better. So when I say human behavior, you should think about how somebody is acting, how he or she gets up in the morning, what he or she does for work. Then relationships, you should be visualizing two people, communities interacting. What makes a group function and not function well, right? What happens when you have relationships between two people and then maybe 100 people? And societal structures. This is a really important word. So societal structures can be a couple of different things. You can think of it as a larger relationship, right? Where now you're talking about thousands and thousands and 100,000 people. So that's a societal structure. How does it work? Voting systems, government institutions, right? Structures of society, education, the school system. So the structure of our culture, of our society. So when I talk about these things, usually I find them very interesting, and I know you do too, right? If we're open-minded. So make sure that whenever you are getting your reading, you're listening for the TOEFL on your tougher topics, let yourself be a student, because the TOEFL in the end is doing a lot of weird things, but fundamentally trying to test your instant learning. We're going to give you something today for the first time that you've never understood or heard before. That's our goal. How well do you understand it? Because that tells us how well you can survive in an academic setting with something that you're not familiar with, where you're always learning. So human behavior, relationships, and societal structures. Archaeology is where you dig into the ground, right? You unearth artifacts to try to understand the human behavior, the societal structure, the relationships of past civilizations. So archaeology is looking at ancient artifacts, old things that a culture has left behind, to try to understand it. How did they cook? How did they teach? How did they live? So again, when you don't just think of the word, but where it fits in these 4 larger topics, it can make a lot more sense. Political topics definitely deal with the social sciences too, because the political topics on the TOEFL will be how the system works. How do government systems function? Because usually you have more than one structure. This structure, judicial, checks this structure, that's legislative, and this one that's management. So if you always think of it in terms of physical sciences, life sciences, social sciences, and art, that big concept, it can make a little bit of sense, because whenever you get that topic on political, right, anything political, it's like, how do people govern themselves? How do societies work? And that makes it a little easier when you get down to the details that you may not be familiar with. So we got to human behavior, relationships, and societal structures. The next thing is, this encompasses disciplines like sociology, psychology, economics, and anthropology. So sociology we're pretty familiar with, and that's just the study of society, how people interact with each other within cities and countries. Psychology deals with human behavior, right? The way that we think and how that influences the way that we behave. Economics is a good one too, because when you learn about business, you do want to think about it a bit of social sciences, because economics is the decisions people make in businesses as well as the purchase decisions. So instead of just thinking about how we behave in general, it's how do we behave within the economy? What do we buy? What do we not buy? How do we work? How do we like to work, not work? What's the relationship between management and labor, right? So that's what the TOEFL is trying to explore, because it's always more academic. And anthropology. And anthropology is similar to archaeology in that anthropology goes to study cultures. And usually when you get an anthropology topic, it's a culture that is not one that's established, or not one that's usually discussed. So tribes or small cultures that have survived for hundreds or thousands of years untouched in the Amazon rainforest, right? How do they interact? How do they build relationships? How do they have families? So again, if you think of all of these topics in terms of this social science, right? The science of our society of people, it can make a lot more sense to you, be more interesting. You know, it's always going to be about the story of people or a group of people and why they do what they do and how they interact. Which, if you think about, just from the way I'm discussing, it can be a little bit more comfortable. So now we go on to the next one. These fields seek to understand how individuals and groups interact and shape their communities. Now, this is where I want to support you with your vocab. Let's look at some of the vocab used so far. Focus, examine, encompass, seek to understand, and shape. In my experience, these verbs, these words, you'll feel are easy, right? Oh, simple. If you get most of your lecture or reading with verbs like these, which is great. But a lot of times when you're speaking or writing, I won't see you use these words, which can be such wonderful illustrations of your level and boost your score. So it's so important. Focus, examine, encompass, seek to understand, and shape. Shape your ideas, shape your relationship, shape your perspective. These are words that should be on flashcards, these really good basic academic words. And you should be, for speaking question 1, 2, 3, or 4, I think that's the easiest to practice vocab with. You should be answering the questions with no timer and just flipping through flashcards of this basic vocab, these basic verbs, and pushing yourself to use them. And as you do so, you're going to find that they're very helpful, very effective in communicating slightly more complex ideas. So what I find is usually the vocabulary that we speak with can be many times lower than the vocabulary that we understand. So I want you to be using the vocab that you find. But remember, on the TOEFL, when you're taking it, you have to be clear and you have to use the right word. So don't force the vocab on your TOEFL. Force the vocab when you practice. That way you build enough awareness of all of these words that are helpful, so that when you take your TOEFL, the right word that is a bit more academic, a bit more clear, is going to come out naturally. So you force it when you study, so that when you take the exam, the right word comes out naturally. So the next sentence, The social sciences combine quantitative and qualitative approaches. Super important that you know these words. This involves statistical analysis of population trends and in-depth ethnographic studies of specific communities. So let's repeat that. There are two things I want to show you here. The social sciences combine. That's another great word that many of us are familiar with, but we need to be comfortable using. Putting things together, combine. Quantitative. So quantitative, right, is quantity. That means you're looking at numbers, statistics. So you're studying in a more number-based way. How many people are going here? How many people are doing this? When we introduce this change, how many more people did it? How much fewer people did it? Qualitative is quality. Qualitative usually means interviews, more of a experience. So when I talk to these people, this is what I see, this is what I observe. They're happier, they're sadder, they walk this way, something where it's more based on the quality, which is the observation of an interaction. Now there are so these are important words. That's number one. Number two, on the TOEFL, there's this academic parallelism. So you see that there are two words that are a little bit advanced that the TOEFL may not always expect you to know. Quantitative and qualitative. So those are two words. The next sentence illustrates them. This involves statistical analysis of population trends and in-depth ethnographic studies of specific communities. Are you aware that when you learn, especially two things in a row or three things, the next sentence will not repeat what it said earlier usually, but will define it in the same order? So the first thing mentioned was quantitative. So that's the first thing defined or illustrated. Statistical analysis of population trends. Are we becoming bigger or smaller, right? Population trend. The second, and in-depth ethnographic studies of specific communities. That's qualitative. Very common pattern on the TOEFL that you want to get used to. That when it defines a word, especially two words, it'll define them later in the same order. For example, if in the lecture we say we're going to talk about apples, oranges, and strawberries, the rest of the lecture is going to follow that pattern. First apples, then oranges, then strawberries. Because it's academic, so it needs to have that kind of structure. So if you're aware of that, you can really use that to your advantage. So for me, ethnographic studies, ethnographic. So ethno deals with cultures, peoples, tribes, right? Graphic is like putting it on a graph. So the study, how it works, how it functions. So ethnographic is another word that deals with studying the relationship over time of a tribe, how tribes interact, how communities intermarry, how a culture within itself, right, how it works and functions. Same thing. Now the next sentence, for instance, researchers tracked over 12,000 people across several decades. So pretty comfortable word, but that verb tracked, I'm going to repeat the verbs: focus, examine, encompass, seek to understand, shape, combine, track, right? Track. A lot of us now, you use your phone, you use your watch. If you have your, your smart watch, you use them to track your steps, right? How many steps you take. You use it to track your heartbeat, your heart rate. You use it to track how you sleep or monitor how you sleep, right? And then these things combine, sometimes smartwatches combine this data, combine what it learns from tracking your steps and tracking your heart rate and tracking your sleep patterns or monitoring them. It combines that information to tell you how healthy you are, right? So again, as I said, write down these good basic vocab words on flashcards. Practice speaking question 1, 2, 3, or 4 from your material, those of you with NoteFull, no timer, and then just try to express information using them. And it's really going to level up how you speak to raise your score. So it's so important that when you study topics that you're unfamiliar with, or even that you're familiar with, right? But unfamiliar especially, that not just the nouns, because nouns are very specific, right? You have anthropology, you have economics, you have quantitative approach, qualitative approach, you have ethnography. These are like the nouns, the vocab words of the field. Don't forget the verbs, because the verbs are kind of how you describe everything. And also sometimes you have really good nouns like approach, right? And so that's a word that is used everywhere. So you can tell there are specific nouns that are for this field, good to memorize and learn. That's really just to understand. And then there are good verbs and nouns that are more fundamental to academic explanation. You want to try to use those words. And the best way is, as I said for the fourth time on the speaking, just moving through them, forcing yourself to use them to get comfortable. Oh, Luciana, just took my TOEFL test. My score was really bad. Sorry to hear that. Happy you're here because you haven't let that discourage you. You're back to your studies. Make sure that you remember, for you and everybody, that you want to plan your studies from your score. So what's your dream score? What's the score you just got? And you want to do the math that every 100 hours you study, you can improve 4+ points. So that tells you how many more hours you want to study before you take your next TOEFL, so you're ready, right? 100 hours for every 4 points. So if you want to improve 20 points, you want to prepare yourself to study 500 hours. And of course, as you study, you're monitoring, you're practicing, you're seeing whether you're choosing answers correctly or not. So you can adjust if you start to improve faster than that. But that's the expectation you want to have, so you don't retake the TOEFL too early and then maybe burn yourself out, don't get the results that you expect. This way you're investing in your improvement versus, the TOEFL, giving them more of what they don't need, which is your money. So next, they mapped their social connections and emotional states. Now, this is a really good word. They mapped. So there are 12,000 people who they tracked for several decades. So what were they doing? What were they tracking? They mapped their social connections and emotional states. This is a huge visualization sentence that they mapped. So you got to think of a map, right? A map shows you somewhere, right? Their social connections. Okay. Can you visualize what a social connection is? It is a relationship. You're connected with certain people, your friends, your family, your colleagues, your peers at work. So you map the social connections. So that's interesting. 12,000 people. Can you imagine that map where with every person you have their connections, brothers and sisters, and you're studying them? So it's this big web, like a spider web, and emotional states. Interesting. So you had the people that you were connected with, brothers, sisters, friends, colleagues. You made a map of that, as well as the emotional state. So I imagine the only way you do that is over time, right? You feel happy today, you feel sad at night, you feel excited in the morning. So that visualization clarifies, because this sentence didn't tell us that. But if you think about your emotional state, I guess it could be for one moment, but if you're doing this for several decades, relationships are probably appearing and disappearing in the map. Emotional states over decades are changing, right? Happiness, sadness, excited, depressed, neutral, thrilled, positive, calm, energized, right? All these emotional states. Now you become curious. If you visualize that, what happened? What did you discover? They discovered that happiness spreads through social networks. Because remember, it's a social network because you mapped the social connections. So that created the social network, right? Like a contagion. So contagion, of course, is something contagious, which is like a virus that catches, meaning I'm here and you're over there. and my virus jumps over to you or vice versa. So it catches, it's contagious. So happiness spreads through social networks like a contagion. So can you see the map? And you can think, I'm happy. And then my network, maybe these students, you that I'm connected with, or people around me, they start to become happy. Like you can see the data show, hey, there are pockets. There are areas of happiness. And I just said the word pocket, which is a great academic word. Pocket is like a little area, right? Like the pocket in your pants, the pocket in your shirt. So that's where something is held that's small, right? So it's like pockets of happiness. So I'm going to finish this lecture and then I'm going to review it so we get all the ideas. So the final sentence. So we just discovered that happiness spreads through social networks like a contagion. The last sentence is, this ripple effect can extend up to 3 degrees of separation. So ripple effect, ripple, like ripples in the water when you throw a stone, it ripples. Fantastic word, right? Ripple effect is a noun. Ripple is also a verb. Great for you to study. Can extend, another great word that we know, but sometimes we don't use that much in our speech, up to 3 degrees of separation. So a degree of separation is, you can think, it's a little bit hard to explain, but simply someone who's not directly connected to you. So for example, we are friends. We are one to the other. First degree of separation. We're friends. A friend of your friend, right? I'm not really friends with him so much, but a friend of your friend, we could say 2 degrees of separation, or maybe 1 degree. Ooh, I have to review this vocab word. So this one tricks me because I don't know whether the first degree starts immediately or with the next one, but you get the idea. And then 3 degrees of separation would be maybe brother, friend's brother. So this idea that who you're connected to is influenced by me, even if I don't know them, because I influence you and you influence your friend that I don't know. And then that friend influences her friend. So even that person I never talked to, didn't touch, didn't see, that person is changing behavior because of me. So 3 degrees of separation means we influence, according to this study, the emotions of somebody 3 degrees away from us. Right? So really, really interesting, good to research and study. So let me deliver that lecture again from the beginning. TOEFL topics focus on the physical sciences, life sciences, social sciences, and art. The social sciences examine human behavior, relationships, and societal structures. It encompasses disciplines like sociology, psychology, economics, and anthropology. These fields seek to understand how individuals and groups interact and shape their communities. The social sciences combine quantitative and qualitative approaches. This involves statistical analysis of population trends and in-depth ethnographic studies of specific communities. For instance, researchers tracked over 12,000 people across several decades. They mapped their social connections and emotional states. They discovered that happiness spreads through societal networks like a contagion. This ripple effect can extend up to 3 degrees of separation. How long can I take the test if I do your NoteFull program? That's a great question. I would say that to get the benefit, you want to study your course with NoteFull at least 40 hours. At least 40 hours. 10 hours each section, reading, listening, speaking, and writing. You're going to get something. But ideally, something closer to what you need for your score. So as we said, if you scored an 80 and you need a 92, that's 12 points. 100 hours for every 4 points, that's 300 hours. So you would study your NoteFull course with us 300 hours. So that'll give enough memorization, enough mastery so that we improve our level. So when we sit and take the exam, we're different. We score higher. A la mer, I've taken the TOEFL and IELTS 8 times, but never got good scores. I feel very down. Ooh, a la mer, for you and everybody. Let's make 2025 the year you defeat your TOEFL. We got to pick one exam. Because if you're dividing your attention between 2 exams, you are trying to do 2 things at once, which is already overwhelming. So you got to pick one, whether it's IELTS or TOEFL. For the TOEFL, make sure that you now don't take your exam until you've studied sufficient hours to improve. So you make sure that you track your study time and you do your math today. How many points do you need to improve? You got to study 100 hours for every 4 points you want. So it's like 25 hours per point. You do that math, you plan it out, and you study. You study those hours. You visualize yourself taking the exam. You do that with our course, and you will pass. You will have a different experience. This is, for me, sometimes the danger of studying a lot, but maybe not tracking our hours, of maybe not following a system as closely as we could. Don't worry. It's normal to feel down, but we're going to pass. That's the way forward. And then, Aya, is it okay if the student starts studying before doing the test to know his level? Yeah, totally fine. I don't want to give you pressure like you can't take the exam. I just want to make sure that you take the exam aware that you're studying in a way that you know is going to work. And so totally fine if you've never taken it before, you haven't studied, and you just want to experience it. Great idea, yeah. If you have the money for that, you feel comfortable, 100%. And when you're studying, let's say you're studying, for 4 or 5 months, and you're not ready because you have a big score you want, you're taking practice, you need more, totally fine to say, I want to take the exam. I don't want to get so disconnected from it. I want to see if I'm doing better. I want to see what it feels like, if I can handle the pressure, if I could do what I've learned. Perfect. Totally support you. As long as you are doing it in a way where you feel, yeah, I'm making this decision for me, it makes sense, and I'm going to do my best and pass, and if I don't, I'm okay. I'm going to keep my studies going. And then, Daner, which app do you recommend to prepare for the exam? Well, of course, I'll always support you with studying with us, NoteFull, right? So you can click the link on our bio so that you have all of the help that you need. And on our site, not an app, you can use the site on your computer, your iPad, your smartphones, etc. And there are so many, you can always search and find what works for you. But I invite you to work with us, you and everybody. And what's the main difference between the TOEFL and IELTS exams? Well, there's a couple of differences. The major difference is that the IELTS exam you take and your speaking is with a person. So you always have to be at face-to-face. And the writing is handwritten. So it's like a different experience of an exam. The other thing is the structure of the exam. The length is similar. It's about 2 hours for each of them. And the difficulty level of the IELTS is a little bit, it's not as difficult as the TOEFL. The TOEFL is a bit more intense, a bit more high-level academic vocab, slightly. They're still both difficult exams. But they both test you on the reading, listening, speaking, and writing. And they do it in slightly different ways. For example, in the reading, you have to write in answers. On the TOEFL, you have to select. So the TOEFL is a very standard, all in a computerized, standardized test. The IELTS, you could say, is a little bit more human. So you can always look online and just search TOEFL exam, and then you'll see the structure of it. And then IELTS exam, you'll see the structure, like a 5-minute video. But I hope that difference illustrates. It's also scored differently. The TOEFL, the highest score is 120. Every section, reading, listening, speaking, writing, is out of 30. And the IELTS is in bands, right? All the way to, I forget, 9. So it's it's a pretty different structure, but of course the same overall skills, but just evaluated differently. And then Mayuri, where do we do the practice exams from? Well, there are a lot of sources. If you just search online, go Google TOEFL practice online, you're going to see a lot of sources. When you register for the TOEFL with ETS, you get a free exam there. So if you have registered or plan to register, you'll get that. Also, the same site, ETS, the TOEFL, they offer that where for I think $45, $50, they give you an exam, a practice mock exam, and they have automatic rating, right, for the reading, listening, speaking, and writing, right, just computer generated. We have it at NoteFull, but we're not about practice exams, right? I'll talk about this at the end. We're about training. So the way our system works is it's not just you practice and then you look at the answers, but just like this, I take you through things. So we practice and then I take you through the review. So it's much more about detailed training where we train, practice at the same time, back and forth, so that we improve together. And then regard, do we continue to have the free practice test by ETS after we try it or not? I don't remember, but yes, I believe so. It'll be there static for you. It won't necessarily disappear. I don't know that they'll always regrade you, right? I don't know that they'll score you every single time in the speaking if you resubmit, but you should have that. And then Enome, what is harder, input or output? Well, that's interesting. I think input, you mean the reading and listening, answering questions, and output, do you mean producing information like the speaking and writing? If I understood correctly, for most students, it varies on how you learned English. For students who learned English in a very academic setting, the reading and listening is easier. They score higher. For those who learned a little bit more, I guess, independently and comfortably, so they're practicing speaking, they're practicing maybe not writing as much, then the speaking and writing can be easier. And then the academic side is harder. So it depends on the student, but either way, for everybody to improve any section, right? 100 hours for every 4 points. And then dentist, I have university applications date coming. Do you recommend booking another test in 15 days? It's a really tricky one because for those of you who have tight deadlines, sometimes it can be uncomfortable to follow the feedback that I'm giving you of study 100 hours for every 4 points. So here's something super important. Study 100 hours for every 4 points you need. So if you need to improve, let's say 12 points, that's 300 hours. And if you can study, let's say 25 hours a week, perfect, beautiful, great. That's going to be about 12 weeks, right? Something like 3 months. Make your mind set for that. Study like that. And if you want to take an exam just to feel better, to give your best try, maybe after 15 days, it's okay, do it, but make sure that your mind is, I'm taking an exam within my 300-hour journey, because your perspective, the way you think, is unbelievably important. If you start changing how you study to match your exam, it can be a very, in my experience, painful journey, because you're intensely studying before an exam, you're not improving enough, you wind up getting a similar score, or maybe a little better, then you feel discouraged and you crash. You wait a while, then you say, I gotta take the exam, I don't have motivation, I'm gonna schedule another exam to push me to study, and this cycle repeats. It can work for you, right? Everybody's different. But in my experience, that's probably not that common to work. So definitely, for me, plan your studies out according to that rule. 100 hours for every 4 points. How many hours are you studying a week, right? And then you know when you need to take the exam. And if you take it earlier because you want to check your level, you have deadlines coming, you feel a bit stressed, add it, but don't change how you study. Keep that discipline, keep that consistency, and that way I think it's the best of, as we say, both worlds. Because remember, the hard part is, if you say, but I only have 2 weeks before my deadline, continue to say do what I've said. Do what I've said. And be aware, the TOEFL doesn't change its score according to your deadlines. So you want to think to yourself, just in case, stay positive, stay enthusiastic, be confident. But if it takes 300 hours to improve, and you don't have that time to study for your deadline, let your mind be aware that you might have to apply for the next semester or for the next year, because especially if you're going to institutions that require a minimum score, right? Dentistry usually a minimum of 100. And sometimes you can email and you can ask for exceptions because your application is strong. So do everything you can do. But remember, because it's a little bit like I always say, I have 1,000 vocabulary words to learn by tomorrow. Okay, let's do our best. But as a human being with an organic brain, that is rare, right? Maybe 1 out of 1,000,000 people might be able to do that, if at all, because it's a little bit like saying, I'm going to grow 1 foot in 1 day. We can do anything, but we also want to be aware of ourselves. So one quick extra thing, you're studying every week. You're noticing how fast you learn vocab, how much you improve. So you're seeing, your body is showing you, this is how fast I learn. This is how much time I need. So sometimes we ignore that completely. So if I've spent 2 weeks studying or 3 weeks studying really hard and I'm still forgetting and I still need to review, then it means, you know what, maybe in order to improve, I need a few months because that's what my body is telling me. And then sometimes, we think, it must be because I'm not studying the right trick or tip or strategy. It could be, right? So you want to explore and see what works for you. But no strategy, no tip, no hack, no trick, regardless of how much marketing you hear, how many promises people make, it doesn't work that way. So let yourself really understand you're an academic professional. You know how much time it takes you to learn. Make sure you take the exam seriously, prepare yourself, and give yourself enough time to succeed, or else it can be quite painful. If you found that helpful and supportive, make sure you like and subscribe for more. And you can click the link in our description where you can not only see our Instagram account so that you can follow if you're not already for future lives and other things, and also our site where you can get more free training on every section of your TOEFL, reading, listening, speaking, and writing. You can understand what level you're at, what you need to do to improve, how many hours you need to study to succeed, and get all of the training material from us to make sure that you succeed like our other success stories. So your success is coming, study hard, and we will defeat your TOEFL. And a little reminder, I'm Joseph from NoteFull. So I know that sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming. There's a lot of material to study, and sometimes they don't agree. So I just want to encourage you that if you're studying hard, it doesn't matter what you're studying. If you think about yourself improving your skills in your reading, listening, speaking, and writing, you're going to do better and you're going to pass. And so what makes what we train special is that it comes from my own experience over 16 plus years, helping thousands of students pass the TOEFL. Having taken it since 2008, every year or so, just knowing the TOEFL and what it takes to succeed. Just like you being there in the test center, taking the exam, having taken the home edition. So trust that what I'm showing you here is really meant to work and get you to success.